We have a packed day today, and I appreciate everyone being here. There's some great talks in the lineup. My favorite is going to be the issuance talk. The old title of it was Validators Are Dead, but they did adjust it to be a little more reasonable. But without further ado, introducing Kubi to kick us off and set the framing for the day.
Thanks. Good morning, everyone. So like Drew said, we have a bunch of talks, panels, fireside chats planned for the day. But before we get into all of that, I just wanted to take a couple minutes to give a little bit of a context about what the Blockspace Forum is all about, some of the motivations, and also some of the work that we've already done. So to start with some basics, if we think about what the core product or the core business of Ethereum is, I would posit it is essentially the sale and the production of Blockspace. And when I say Blockspace, what I mean is essentially compute capacity that is verified per consensus. And every transaction on a blockchain, whether it's a swap or a transfer or even a smart contract deployment, consumes block space. Now, a blockchain like Ethereum has like this notion of a slot that is essentially the production window of this commodity. And for now, at least for the time being, that's 12 seconds. Hopefully not much longer. But also, Blockspace has these properties, and these properties essentially determine the grade of this commodity that's Blockspace. So there are a bunch of things, for example, client diversity, which basically minimizes concentration and failure risk. There are things like geographic decentralization, which impacts things like censorship resistance and robustness, and a bunch of other properties. And I would make the claim that based on these properties, Ethereum actually produces the highest grade of block space on the planet today. Now, the protocol does a lot of work to ensure that these properties exist and that we have this high quality block space that is being produced. But then if the consumption paths to access the block space itself doesn't exhibit some of the same properties, or I would say if there's a risk that these properties get diminished, that overall basically creates this risk that this edge that Ethereum has, which is having this very high grade block space, gets eroded away, right? And so this is the thing that we all want to prevent. Also, 90% of block space today already gets sold out of protocol by this mechanism called proposer-builder separation, which was created roughly 4 years ago now. And overall, I would say this has been very successful. It's not perfect, there's some challenges, but overall, the core goal, which was to essentially alleviate some of the centralization pressure from the core protocol to make sure that these core properties are still maintained, that has been well executed. And when we say centralization pressure, it's essentially this heavy lifting that these actors have to do in order to allocate block space to facilitate auctions and price discovery. And we now have these entities like builders and relays that serve the protocol in a way to make sure that block space gets allocated correctly. And it's a good achievement. But then, as I said before, there are challenges that have emerged now that we are 4 years almost into the merge. And these challenges pose this risk. And we talked about some of them in this article that we posted in December earlier. but we basically categorize them across 4 segments, which is roughly economics, robustness, services, and as well as performance. We'll talk about those more later. And this is essentially what the Blockspace Forum is about. So this is a holistic market structure / ecosystem challenge that needs to be addressed. And it is really not up to a single team, but it's a matter of multiple stakeholders basically all coming together and pulling into the same direction. And ideally, that direction also being aligned with the core protocol itself. So we have had our initial workshop back in Buenos Aires, I think this was in November last year, where we actually talked about some of these key challenges. And later in December last year, we published this post which tried to distill this in a more succinct way. Then we also met up in East Denver, had some dinners, and started actually talking about some of the solutions. We're still far away from any final designs, but this is kind of the path that we are on to address some of these challenges. So today is mainly going to be about catching people up a little bit on the status quo, like what's the state of the current supply chain, the market structure, some stats. People will give also talks about some of the broader concepts that are orthogonal to the supply chain and the market structure itself. And then tomorrow will be mostly about having very technical discussions in a workshop-style format, where we will continue the discussions on how we address some of these challenges. Then finally, I want to say that the Blockspace Forum is not just about having conversations, but it's really about turning these conversations into specs, and then turning these specs into MVPs or prototypes, and then finally shipping production code. So we want to take a really pragmatic and real-world approach to solving some of these problems, and doing this also in an iterative fashion, not just come up with designs and never ship anything. So I think that's very important. So with that in mind, let's get into it.
Awesome. Thank you, Kubi. Next we have